Hey guys, tonight we're stepping behind the velvet curtain of a tiny apothecary tucked away in the back alleys of a noble city where powdered wigs rustle and secrets breathe louder than sermons. You won't find your typical herbs and potions here, unless your typical herbs come laced with opium, and your potions double as invitations to rebellion. You're not just a healer. You're an artisan of discretion, a pharmacist of desire, a silent confidant to women who cannot speak their truths aloud. And tonight, the brass bell above your door rings before dawn, summoning you to your strangest and most delicate craft. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end, drop a comment with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're already awake when the bell chimes. You always are. In your trade, sleep isn't as reliable as scandal. Outside, the air still clings to the midnight chill. You light the oil lamp anyway, casting warm honey across the shelves. Dried sage, crumbled lavender, and a suspiciously glossy jar labeled only with a violet ribbon. The bell chimes again. Soft footsteps. A gloved hand lifts the latch before you even reach the door. She steps in like she owns the moonlight. Gown barely laced, cheeks pale, eyes alert. You don't need to ask her name. She's the Marquise. You know that because she only arrives when her husband is away on campaign, which, by your calculations, is roughly every month. Convenient. She says nothing, just nods toward the back, past the powders, past the elixirs, into the small room behind the curtain where you keep the true inventory. You prepare tea, not for her, for time. You've learned that most noble women prefer to stare at the floor for at least 4 minutes before they ask for what they came for. Some call it shame. You call it ritual. She finally speaks. Same design, smoother wood, and the oil from Verona, the one that smells like citrus. You nod. No need for parchment. Your memory is its own kind of drawer. You open the cabinet, not the public one, the real one, hidden behind jars of crushed nettles and a slightly theatrical taxidermy owl. Inside, maple wood cylinders, small and discreet, rounded by hand, sanded smooth with ash bark, and polished with beeswax and silence. You pick one up and turn it in your palm. She watches, but pretends not to. You apply a few drops of the orange blossom oil, imported, ridiculously expensive, allegedly once worn by the Queen of Cyprus. Historians still argue whether that's true, or if that tale was invented by the merchant to triple his price. Either way, it works. You wrap it in linen, slide it into a box carved to look like a devotional prayer book. No one will question a noblewoman clutching psalms on her way home. Before she leaves, she hesitates. Do you ever make anything with ivory? Her voice lowers, but not because of fear, more like fantasy. You pause. Ivory is rare, scandalously so, and regulated, but it warms in the hand and holds polish like no wood can. You don't answer right away. Instead, you refill her tea and gesture toward the fire. Some commissions are worth more than coin. They're worth stories or protection. She leaves a pouch of gold on the bench without counting. You pretend not to hear the quickened pace of her shoes on the cobblestone. When the door closes, the shop grows quiet again, except for the owl's blank stare. You sip the leftover tea. It's bitter, like knowledge, like power you can't wear openly, but press against your ribs like a hidden dagger. And so begins another day. You wipe the counter with cloth soaked in vinegar, partly for cleanliness, partly tradition. There's no spell, no incantation, just muscle memory and intention. You turn the sign to close for exactly 6 minutes, long enough to write her initials in your ledger, small, coded, and disguised under a fake remedy for hysteria. Later, when the city wakes, you'll sell chamomile for colicky babies and vinegar for cleaning pewter. But in the stillness before dawn, you craft something holier than all of it. A space where a woman's desire isn't a sin, just a commission. You're still rinsing the cup when the next knock comes. Not the bell this time, a gentle, deliberate knock. 3 slow taps like an old superstition. That means it's Madame Duval. She doesn't like the bell, says it rattles the nerves. You suspect it's more about plausible deniability. She always enters with a veil, even in summer, even when no one else is around. Her walk is precise, like she's been trained to move through rooms without making a ripple. And her request is always the same. Powders for paleness, drops for dreaming. She places her list on the counter, handwritten, folded, sealed with wax. You never open it in front of her. She prefers the illusion of bureaucracy. You slide the envelope into your drawer and pull the items from memory. 1 tin of white lead powder, laced with just enough vinegar to keep the skin from cracking, though not enough to prevent poisoning, of course. Beauty comes with consequences, sometimes permanent ones. The dreaming drops are more art than science. Laudanum, yes, but balanced with crushed rose petals and a hint of anise. You once added too much. Madame Duval dreamed of fire for a week. She returned it, calm as ever, and asked you to adjust the proportions. You did. You always do. On your shelf sits a blue-glazed bottle shaped like a swan. No one buys it. It's decorative, mostly. But you know Madam stares at it each visit. That's the one meant for deeper dreams. Not sleep, but soft erasure. You never offer it. She never asks. You include a small, unlabeled sachet with her order. Powdered damiana and clove, a blend rumored to have once graced the sheets of a French duchess and her entire reading club. Historians still argue whether that club was political or carnal. You suspect both. You package her things in a plain box tied with blue string. Blue means discretion. Always has. Before she leaves, she pauses, as she always does, and leans in a little too close. Have you ever made something that hums? You blink. She smiles. It was in a Greek text I read. Something about a reed and beeswax and a very determined priestess. Ah, that old story. You know it too. The temple of Artemis, where priestesses allegedly crafted objects from hollow reeds filled with wing casings, activated by breath and friction. Fringe historians claim it's one of the earliest examples of kinetic resonance. Orthodox historians call it blasphemous myth. But then again, they always do. You nod slowly and make a note in your internal ledger. No promises, but maybe if you can find the right read. She leaves without another word, and the veil slips slightly as the wind catches the door. You catch a glimpse of a fading bruise behind her ear. You don't ask. You just tighten the blue string next time. You set her box aside and reach for your polishing cloth. A quiet ritual. Sanding, rubbing, checking for splinters. Not for wood today, but for glass. The small kind, shaped like a tear, with a hollow center. You've only ever sold 2. One went to a widow who wrote you poems after. The other, well, you never saw her again. The market for such things is narrow, but loyal, and when it speaks, it does so in euphemisms, like nervous agitation and uterine congestion. You're fluent in both. A knock on the back window startles you. That means it's Marta, the baker's daughter, not a customer, a runner. She trades you gossip for herbs. Today she brings wild mint and a secret. The midwife said the Countess is buying gloves 3 sizes too small. Interesting. That means the Countess plans to visit soon, and she'll be asking for the new design, the one with curved grip and finger loop. The one you pretended didn't exist yet. You light a second candle. Time to work. There's a kind of intimacy in the workshop. Not romantic, not even sensual. Just precise, measured, sacred. You mix beeswax with powdered mother-of-pearl. Pour it slowly into the mold you carved from softened ash wood. The shape is not anatomical, not overt,
but it fits in the hand like memory. You let it set while you grind cinnamon bark for the traveling merchant's tea. He thinks it's for his digestion. You know better. His wife sends you secret letters every equinox. As dusk approaches, you wrap the new piece in velvet, even though it hasn't been ordered yet. Some objects are meant to wait. And maybe, just maybe, hum.
The rain begins just before sundown, as it often does in stories where secrets swell in dark corners. You reach for the shutters, but before you can fasten them, the bell rings. This time, not shy, not discreet. A rushed chime, followed by soaked footsteps. That means trouble, or someone very new, or both. She enters without removing her hood, younger than your usual patrons. Her cloak drips onto your stone floor, leaving a slow-growing puddle. She doesn't notice. I've been told you help with... She stops herself, breathes, looks at the shelves. Cramps, the monthly kind. You nod slowly, then gesture to the drawer with calming teas and dried yarrow. That's the public solution, the polite one, the one that satisfies curious ears. But she doesn't move. She swallows and whispers. They said you have something smaller, something that helps it pass, so it doesn't start again. Ah, you see now. Her hands are shaking, not from cold. You guide her to the side bench, the one with the worn cushion and the tin of cloves for calming the breath. She doesn't sit, too afraid to make herself still. So you move gently, as if preparing a simple poultice, as if tonight is ordinary. You retrieve a small linen bundle from the drawer behind the owl. Yes, that drawer. Inside, a carved piece of red clay, hollowed at the core. Not beautiful, not elaborate, just practical. Its name changes depending on who asks. For some, it's the relief tool. For others, the guardian. In secret, among women, it's known as the stopper of cycles. Historians still debate whether such tools were ever mass-produced in ancient times, or only passed down among midwives and grannies with strong nerves. You hand it to her wordlessly, along with a bottle of cooling oil made from crushed poppy seeds and pressed fennel root. It won't stop everything. Nothing ever does. But it will give her a sense of control, and sometimes that's more potent than any cure.
She doesn't look at it, just nods and tucks it into her cloak like contraband. You do not charge her, but you press a small sachet into her hand, something that smells of marjoram and basil. Put this near your pillow, you murmur, to soften the nightmares. She doesn't thank you. You're glad for that. Thanks make it feel transactional. This wasn't. After she leaves, you lock the front door for the evening. A rare thing, but some nights are meant for quiet. You return to your work table and light the brass lamp, the one gifted by an ex-nun with steady hands and no interest in God. You once made her something shaped like a thimble. She sent you a letter a year later saying she'd opened a school for girls. No curriculum, just storytelling. You open your book of sketches, not the one labeled formulas, but the other one, worn at the corners, its cover stained with linseed and wax. Inside, silhouettes, ideas, half-invented dreams. One catches your eye. A drawing of a new device, shaped not for insertion, but for pressure. Contoured to the palm, warm to the skin. You, of course, have a more informed opinion. The rain continues. You boil water for evening tea, valerian root and lemon balm, a blend that pairs nicely with regret and long, candle-lit nights. As you sip, you remember the woman who once asked for a tool not for herself, but for her husband. Said she wanted to even the odds. You made her a brass ring that vibrated slightly when warmed by body heat. She sent you plum preserves every spring after that. The shop creaks as it settles into the damp. You take comfort in it, in the familiarity of your strange little world. You are not a magician. You are not a physician. You are something far more dangerous. You listen. You remember. And you give women what no one else will. Not fantasy, not rebellion, but options. Tomorrow, someone will come for a pain tonic, someone else for a quiet thrill, and someone, perhaps the bishop's cook again, for the holy water you bottle from rose-infused rain. But for now, you close your book, stoke the fire, and let the scent of poppies and cloves fill the air. Outside, the storm gathers. Inside, you are already preparing the next request.
You rise before dawn, not because you want to, but because someone always knocks just before it, as if the city herself has a nervous conscience. This time, it's not a customer, it's a courier. Small, wiry, eyes like a ferret's, and fingers ink-stained from copying sermons he probably doesn't believe in. He hands you a sealed envelope. No return mark, but The wax bears a symbol, a coiled snake biting its tail, the crest of House d'Argent. You already know what this is. Inside, a simple sentence written in a slanted, impatient hand. The Basilisk Drawer. New material. Discretion vital. You glance at the drawer beneath the taxidermied basilisk. You haven't opened it in weeks, not since the Venetian merchant delivered a package wrapped in straw and rumor. Inside had been a new type of material, pliable, flesh-toned, water-resistant, and allegedly made from the gut of eels. The merchant claimed it was used by actresses in Florence who needed convincing company on lonely tours. Historians still argue whether eel gut was ever truly used, or if it was just another myth floated to arouse foreign curiosity. You open the drawer and retrieve the half-finished piece from within, elegant, curved, and disturbingly lifelike. You had your doubts, not about the form, but about the need. Until now. The Marquise wants it, or more accurately, demands it, with urgency. You spend the next 2 hours warming the material in hot water and stretching it across a mold shaped to your careful sketches. You'd taken those sketches from anatomical drawings, and also from a Roman statue you probably weren't supposed to measure. But art is in the details. You reinforce the base with a thin ring of polished ivory, a stabilizer, but also a touch of drama. She'll like that. She likes objects that pretend not to be what they are. Once finished, you place it in a lined case of dark velvet, engraved with the symbol of a flower that doesn't exist. A fiction to mask a truth. Later, you wrap the entire package in linen and slide it into a breadbasket. The maid will collect it under the guise of fetching sourdough. You clean your tools with wine, not because it's the best antiseptic, it isn't, but because it's the only thing strong enough to erase the scent of eel. Just as you're wiping the last trace from your hands, the bell rings again, this time with the irregular rhythm of someone impatient or familiar. It's the widow, Madame Four. She does not wait for you to invite her in. "I want something," she says, with a little resistance. You raise an eyebrow. That's new. She sits without invitation and explains, flatly, clinically, that she misses feeling like her body belongs to her, not to memory, not to mourning, to her. You open your second sketchbook, the one you almost never show, and turn to a drawing you labeled Model V, Tension and Thrust. It uses a winding spring, borrowed from a clockmaker's son who owed you a favor, after you replaced his mother's heart tonic with absinthe and she finally stopped screaming at the moon.
You show her the sketch. She stares, then smiles, not with her mouth, but with her shoulders. Make it. Walnut wood. And don't bother making it pretty. You take the commission. That night, you shape the walnut until your knuckles ache. You test the spring. You line the handle with suede. You don't make it pretty, but you make it precise. And you write in your private journal. A machine not of pleasure, not of sin, of reclamation. You'll deliver it in a week, wrapped in waxed paper, labeled pestle handle, custom made. If anyone asks, she's starting a new tincture business. The next morning, you receive a small note pressed between 2 fig leaves in your windowsill. How much for one with pearls? No signature, but you know the handwriting. The bishop's niece. Again. You sigh. You measure a fresh length of goat leather and begin stitching, whispering to no one in particular. I really need to raise my prices.
Morning arrives with fog thick enough to muffle hoofbeats, which is convenient because the woman approaching your shop rides in a closed carriage with curtains drawn and guards who look the other way on purpose. You've met her before, once, briefly, at a banquet where you served as the poison tester's apprentice. She'd been dressed in violet silk, with eyes that did not blink often enough. Now she enters like a whisper in leather boots. I need something, she says, that leaves no trace. You nod and offer tea, not because it helps, she won't drink it, but because it buys you 5 seconds to think. She lays a pouch of coins on your table, heavy, then a sketch, her own, crude but ambitious. The object she wants resembles a scepter, though much smaller, ribbed at intervals, hollow in the base, and weighted? You ask no questions. She explains anyway. He likes to hurt, she says. I like to not be hurt. I want something that reminds me who I am when he forgets. The tea sits untouched. You retrieve a length of polished cherry wood from your reserve, hard, resilient, with a natural sheen that deepens when warmed. You sketch out your own modifications, an inner channel for a tiny sand-weighted core, one that shifts subtly as the device is handled. It won't make noise, but it will respond, like a heartbeat, a memory that shifts with motion. It will take days. She gives you until Friday. After she leaves, you return to your workshop and clear the bench. This isn't just a tool, it's a boundary. You begin with heat. You always do. While the cherry wood cures near the fire, you polish your oldest mold, the one passed down from your mentor, the apothecary who taught you how to distill not just tinctures, but silence. He used to say, "The body lies, but the hands remember." Historians often ignore these kinds of tools. They write about plagues, politics, kings, rarely about the object hidden in a seamstress's drawer, or the box a nun buried behind the convent before she took her final vows. But those things, they were used, and use leaves memory. You file the grooves slowly. Add a ridge where pressure is meant to ground, not inflame. You blend oil of cardamom and myrrh into the wood, a trick you learned from a Moorish merchant who swore by its calming properties, though you suspect he just liked the scent. Either way, it works. Outside, a peddler sings about ribbons. Inside, you craft something no hymn could describe. Later that day, another customer arrives, unexpected but not surprising. It's Isabeau, the Duchess's handmaid. You've seen her weeping in alleyways, and once found her hiding behind your herb racks during a thunderstorm. She doesn't speak, just places a velvet pouch on the counter and unfolds a tiny note. Do you make doubles? You understand immediately. Twins, matching, not identical, complementary. You pull out your apprentice's kit. 2 pieces of blackened rosewood, slender, elegant, meant to interlock like puzzle pieces when placed side by side. A matched set. One for her, one for the Duchess. You don't ask. You fit the pieces together carefully, adjusting each contour so one will nestle into the other like 2 hands in prayer. You stain them with blackberry oil, giving them the deep sheen of wet silk. Then you wrap them separately, one in purple silk, the other in red, and include a poem tucked between the folds. You sign it with your alchemist seal, a crescent moon inside a keyhole. Before she leaves, Isabeau places her hand over yours for a moment. Not romantic, not desperate, just steady. You hold that quiet for the rest of the evening. As you tidy the shop, you come across your old ledger, the one you stopped using after too many names blurred into initials. You flip through and find sketches of devices you never finished. One resembles a rosebud. Another looks like the horn of a narwhal. Impractical, you thought at the time. But now you wonder what other kinds of beauty could be made if you stopped asking permission. You close the book. You extinguish the lamp. And as the city begins to hum, bells tolling, bakers shouting, carriages rattling over cobblestone, you press your hands together and whisper, "Let no one tell me what a tool should be."
Rain again. But this time, it doesn't whisper. It claws. It batters the shutters like some vengeful spirit that's grown tired of subtlety. You're carving walnut near the fire when the knock comes. Not at the front door, but at the side window. The forbidden knock. 3 quick, One long, one silent pause. It's her, the bishop's niece. You unbolt the window, and she slips in like she's done this 100 times, hood soaked, eyes blazing with a secret she can't hold in any longer. I need something, she says, not for pleasure, for remembering. That's new. She shivers, and you hand her a towel. She won't use it. She's not here to be warm. She's here because no one else will let her say the things her body knows. She sits by the fire, fingers twitching in her lap, and begins to speak, fast, quiet, urgent, about the man her uncle wants her to marry, about the nights she lies awake, feeling parts of herself shrink. She says she doesn't want to disappear. She wants to anchor. You know the feeling. It's why you carve. She fumbles in her cloak and pulls out a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a scrap of ivory, a tiny bronze spoon, and a note with a crude sketch, her own attempt at design. It's half wrong, half brilliant. You look at her. She shrugs. I read about the Greeks, the temple women. I tried to copy it. You feel your heart shift, not with pity, but with admiration. She's not here for salvation. She's here for agency. You agree to build it, a hybrid of sorts. The handle from olive wood, soft-grained and comforting. The core made of hollowed brass, warmable over flame, but safe to the touch. Not too big, not too small. She specifies, something I can hide in a psalter. You don't blink, of course. You spend the next day shaping it, not with flourishes, but with care. It's not ornamented, it's personal. At the base, you inlay a strip of mother of pearl, her only request. She says it reminds her of the sea, which she's never seen. You deliver it to her, wrapped in wax paper, folded into the cover of a fake herbal compendium. No one will question it. No one ever questions plants. Later, you sit in your chair, sipping bitter root tea, and remember your first commission. A simple wooden device requested by a widow who wore gloves even indoors. She cried when you handed it to her, not because she was sad, because it reminded her she still had a self beneath the grief. You still keep that first design on your shelf, not for sale, just as a reminder. That night, you clean your tools and notice a chip in one of your carving blades. You consider replacing it, but decide against it. The imperfection reminds you that your work isn't meant to be flawless, just human. Outside, the wind howls. You add another log to the fire and begin work on a new prototype, one that folds, portable, discreet. A traveling companion for a merchant woman, perhaps, or a nun with a secret. Maybe it will never be commissioned, but it deserves to exist anyway. Historians rarely write about these things. Devices, tools, carvings. They speak of swords and treaties and grand betrayals. But you've seen the revolutions that begin in private. They don't thunder. They whisper. And they persist. Just like you. You close the shutters, relight the oil lamp,
and begin shaping the next story from wood, oil, and silence. You don't open the shop the next morning. Instead, you pull the curtains closed, lock the front door, and hang a sign that simply reads, "Under Inventory." That's not a lie. You're out of rose oil, low on velvet pouches, and your best carving chisel snapped like dry bone last night while working on a double-arch handle for a countess with arthritis. But more than that, you're tired. Not in the way that sleep solves. Tired like stone, like parchment worn from too much ink. You need silence, not absence of sound, real silence, the kind that settles inside the bones and gives space for thought. So you steep nettle tea, light cedar incense, and open the red notebook, the one you never show anyone. Inside are designs you haven't dared to make, not because they're obscene, but because they're ambitious. One sketch in particular calls to you now, a device with dual stems, curved away from each other like wings, with a handle meant for external pressure. It's not based on anything you've seen. It came to you in a dream after an evening of too much clove wine and a passing comet. You called it the Laugh Maker. It's a ridiculous name, but the design, not ridiculous at all. You begin carving the twin stems from yew wood, supple and strong. You add grooves for grip, soften the join with lambskin wrap, and fix the tips with smoothed ivory caps. This one is for you, for the art, for the memory of every woman who sat in your chair with a trembling voice and a brave heart. Midway through polishing, you hear the bell, even though the door is locked. You freeze. A note slides under the door. Do you make items for two simultaneously, asking discreetly? Signed, a friend of Tuesdays. You smile. You already know who sent it. The maid who brings coins in bread. She never leaves her name, but she signs her requests with strange phrases. Tuesday's apple, flower and fire, or once simply heart. You write back on the back of a dried chamomile label. Yes, tell her, interlocking, not symmetrical. Be here Friday. Door will be open. You slip the response out the same crack. The wind snatches it like it's done this before. You look back at your laugh maker on the work table. You keep shaping it. You whisper to it like you always do when you work. Not instructions, encouragement. Historians don't understand makers like you. They catalog coins, weapons, royal beds. But they never ask what lay in the pockets of midwives,
or under the floorboards of widows. And they never ask who carved the first handle that curved just so. By dusk, the laugh-maker gleams like stained glass. You wrap it in blue velvet and hide it in the drawer behind the basilisk, where all the sacred things go. Just then, another knock, a familiar one, the Widow Four again. This time, she carries a bottle of brandy and 2 glasses. No order, she says, just quiet. You pour the drinks, sit across from each other, and say nothing for a long time. The fire crackles. Outside, a cat yowls. Inside, something sacred settles between the silences. After she leaves, you find she's left behind a small box. Inside, a pair of gloves embroidered with your initials, a single phrase stitched on the inner cuff, because your hands remember. You close the shop for real now. Tonight there will be no commissions, no chimes, no hidden couches. Just you, the fire, and the small, quiet knowledge that what you do matters, even if no one writes your name.
Tuesdays have a rhythm to them. Not just the maid with the bread, though she always comes, always on time, but something deeper. Like the city exhales midweek. Fewer guards on corners, fewer sermons, more shadows moving with purpose. You open the shop early, just for her. The maid arrives with her usual bundle, rye loaf, perfectly round, warm, hollow in the middle. This time, no note, just a knowing look and a tiny lift of her brow. You smile and slide the bread aside. She waits. From under the counter, you draw a box, slim, cedarwood, brass hinges. Inside, a pair of devices, mirror opposites, not identical, harmonized. One carved from ashwood, firm and light, wrapped at the base in silk thread dyed with cochineal. The other, heavier, walnut, with a wider grip, etched with a spiral groove meant to be traced absent-mindedly, or with intent. You'd tested the balance yourself, not for function, but for feeling. Held side by side, they complete each other. Together, they hum like a held breath. She peers in, then closes the lid without touching anything, just nods. Payments in the heel, she says, tapping the bread. You resist the joke, barely. She leaves like she was never there. You cut open the loaf. Inside, 10 silver florins, a scrap of embroidery floss, and, oddest of all, a pressed flower, blue cornflower, a symbol, perhaps, of loyalty, of boldness, or just something pretty found along the road. Historians still argue whether women of the lower class truly had access to such tools. Some claim intimacy was a luxury reserved for the noble. Others, the ones who've listened, know better. You've sold more of your helpers to laundresses, seamstresses, even a beekeeper with arms like rope. She asked for one made of clay, shaped like the handle of a hive knife,
said she liked to keep her muscle memory sharp. That one still makes you proud. Later that day, you receive an unexpected visitor, Father Armand. Yes, that Father Armand. The one who once delivered a 3-hour sermon on the dangers of vanity and sin stitched into women's clothing. He enters without a smile, no veil of friendliness, just a scroll in his hand and a storm in his shoulders. You brace. But he surprises you. "I need something," he mutters, eyes fixed on the floor, "for nerves, tremors, at night." You pause. The words are fragile, but the shame in them is ancient. You nod. Fetch the tincture. Chamomile, valerian, tincture of lemon balm, and, because you know his kind, 2 drops of tinctured passion flower, just enough to loosen what's never been said. He takes the bottle, hesitates, then adds, "And something my niece could use, a comfort, for when I am away." You nearly drop the stopper, but you steady. You give him a small box, walnut, simple, rounded, unadorned. He doesn't ask what's in it. He doesn't need to. He leaves through the back. You sit down, stunned, not because you served a priest, that's happened before, but because for the first time he asked for something without the shroud of judgment. You light a candle and open your red sketchbook again. You draw something new, a design with a single curve and 3 notches, shaped not like anything literal, but like a gesture. You don't even know what it's for yet, but you trust it. As the candle burns down, you hear laughter outside, real, reckless laughter. 2 young women skipping cuddles. One wears a cloak stitched in a pattern you recognize, the crest of House d'Argent. The other wears gloves embroidered with cornflowers. You don't smile. You grin. You turn the sign to closed, but you keep the lights burning late. Tonight you work not for commission, not for coin, but for continuity. Because Tuesdays aren't just for bread, they're for legacy.
The box arrives near midnight. No knock, no bell, just a thump against the back door, like a cat leaping down from a windowsill. You find it sitting on your doorstep, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a leather cord so tightly you wonder what secret's trying to stay inside. You carry it to your work table and unfold it carefully. Inside, silk gloves, a bloodied ribbon, and something heavier, a pendant engraved with the seal of House Orléans, and beneath that, a folded letter, unsigned. She is dead. We are not. I want what she had, but sharper. No name, but you know the handwriting. The gloves belonged to a woman who came to you once for something firm but forgiving. She asked for a tool shaped like a river stone, curved, weighty, meant to be held
rather than hidden. You delivered it in a sachet of lavender and never saw her again. Until now. You stare at the ribbon. The blood has dried, but its message is still fresh. Someone has turned your kindness into rebellion. You return to the Basilisk Drawer, this time with more intention. You pull out the long parcel wrapped in wax paper. It's your unfinished project, the one you stopped shaping because it felt too exact, too close to being mistaken for a weapon. You unwrap it. A long shaft of blackened oak, carved with diagonal ridges and inlaid with brass studs. A device designed not for secrecy, but for defiance. For someone who doesn't want to blend in anymore. Tonight, you finish it. You add a leather grip soaked in rose oil and dyed crimson with crushed beetle shells. You stamp the handle with your maker's mark, the moon and the keyhole, now surrounded by a ring of thorns. You wrap it in the bloodied ribbon, not as decoration, but as context. Not everyone comes to you for comfort. Some come for retaliation. Historians rarely mention the line between pleasure and power. They prefer categories, objects that are either tools or toys. But you've long known the truth. The body doesn't recognize those categories. It knows tension, release, memory, fear, and the tools it reaches for in the dark. Those are the ones that matter. You sit back and breathe for a moment, staring at the thing you've made. It looks dangerous, not because of its shape, but because of what it will allow. Just then, a second knock, this one soft, 2 fingers, familiar. You open the door to the Duchess herself. No carriage, no guards, just a cloak and eyes that have seen too much. She doesn't speak at first, just hands you a tin. Inside, sugar cubes soaked in something that smells like absinthe and basil. I made them myself, she says. You offer tea. She declines. I need something new, she says. I want it to twist, not break, not bend, just twist. You pause. That's a request you've heard only once before, from a dancer who escaped a convent and claimed she could tell her future based on the pressure points inside her own body. You'd sketched a design back then, a spiral, shaped like a helix, meant to mirror the structure of vines. You pull that sketch out now. The Duchess studies it, then nods. Make it from ironwood, and if anyone asks, it's a hair stick. Of course it is. She leaves without another word. The door shuts.
You're already reaching for the ironwood. The spiral is difficult. It resists the knife, but the grain sings when you get it right. A quiet scrape, 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 like old wind through pine. By dawn, your fingers are blistered, but the shape is perfect. You polish it with rosemary oil and burnish it with silk. You name it in your head, the helix of memory. Because some stories do not bend, they wind inward until they reach the place where pain lives and press.
The fog is thick today, thick enough that the city's spires vanish above their second stories, and the cathedral bells ring like they're calling into cotton. You take it as a blessing. The fewer eyes, the safer your visitors. And today's visitor is not one you want seen. You first spot him through the corner of the shop's warped front window, the dark robe, the stiff hat, the slow, deliberate gait. The Inquisitor, of course. You've heard whispers for weeks that your name's been spoken too often in candlelit confessionals, that some priest's niece was caught with something shaped like a relic and scented like sin, that someone high up wants someone low down to burn. You pour yourself wine, not to drink, to hold. It calms your hands. The Inquisitor enters without knocking. He sniffs the air as if your shelves might exhale guilt. His gaze passes over the jars, the bundles, the labeled tinctures, too slow to be casual. He points at a bottle labeled Elixir for Female Hysteria. Does it work? You nod. He picks it up, reads the ingredients: valerian, honey, oil of ylang-ylang. And what else? He asks. You smile gently, silence, and hope. He doesn't laugh, but he sets the bottle down. He paces, scans. His finger pauses on a small brass case, plain, oval, no markings. Inside, a device made of horn and beeswax, designed for, well, you know. He doesn't open it. He just taps it. You sell these? He asks. You shake your head. I make remedies. Some are for pain, some for emptiness. He steps closer. His eyes, impossibly pale, search yours like hands in a drawer. You walk a thin line, he says, between medicine and temptation. You say nothing. Historians still argue whether inquisitors like him truly targeted herbalists and apothecaries, or whether that's just a tale retold by modern romantics. But your hands sweat regardless. He pulls something from his cloak, a scroll sealed. You brace for it, the accusation, the summons. But no, he sets it down, doesn't hand it to you, just places it like an offering. Then he turns and walks out. No threat, no blessing, just absence. You open the scroll. Inside, a sketch, a rough one, but clear. A device with a hinge, collapsible, adjustable, compact, ingenious. Alongside it,
a single line of writing. Make it for someone who cannot ask for herself. No signature, but the seal on the wax, a serpent curled in a chalice, the sigil of the venerable order of sanctified silence, a cloistered convent, far beyond the city. You've only heard rumors. You exhale slow. This job, this life, always walks the knife's edge, and sometimes the blade bends. You begin crafting the hinge that afternoon, brass with 2 folding arms. You inlay the handle with crushed lavender buds, for scent, but also for softness. You carve the exterior with a repeating wave pattern, symbolic of calm, and wrap it in waxed linen. By dusk, the tool is complete, smaller than most, foldable, almost innocent-looking. You pack it into a false prayer book and tuck the scroll beneath it. You don't know who will receive it, but someone will. That night, your dreams twist. You see a woman behind stone walls, her hands trembling as she unfolds the tool. She smiles, just a little, and you wake up with that image in your chest like a cathedral bell struck at midnight. You write no entry in your journal. Some things deserve to be remembered only by the body. And when you return to the shop the next day, you find a white lily on your doorstep. It is not in bloom, but it's alive.
The lily sits on your windowsill all morning, quiet and unbothered, like it knows it doesn't belong there, but has no intention of leaving. You stare at it longer than you'd care to admit, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because of where it came from. The convent of the sanctified silence doesn't send flowers. Not unless they're saying thank you, or goodbye. You light a candle beside the lily and open your journal. You write only 2 words, still breathing. Midday brings a new distraction. A man you don't recognize. Tall, clean boots, voice too polished for the street, but eyes like someone who's seen war and wishes he hadn't. He doesn't give a name, just a story. I travel, he says, a lot, and she doesn't, so we miss each other. Sometimes in the body, sometimes in the mind. I need something that remembers for me. You nod slowly, trying not to show how deeply that hits. He pulls a pouch from his coat and places it on your counter. Inside, coins, yes, but also a torn page, Greek script, old, hand-copied, a fragment from the Corpus Hippocraticum. You scan it. It speaks of healing through rhythm, through heat, through replication of pressure. You look up. He shrugs. She reads. A lot. Said maybe you'd understand. You do. You think of an old dusty tome
you keep beneath the floorboards, gifted to you years ago by a dying scholar who once claimed that pleasure and memory are stored in the same chambers of the heart. Not anatomically true, perhaps, but emotionally, completely. You begin sketching something complex, a double-handed device, one end shaped for pressure, the other for warmth, a core that holds a stone, heated before use and wrapped in pressed silk to retain temperature. A rhythm dial of sorts, not mechanical, but textured, so the hands can mimic motion, so the memory can stay. This isn't a toy, it's a tether. You work through dusk. The base is carved from cherry, pliable, fragrant. The core, serpentine stone, harvested from the mountain caves beyond the city, known for holding heat like guilt. You wrap it in wool, then silk, then tuck it into the handle. The final layer is beeswax with powdered rosewood. It smells like her, probably, whoever she is. You test the pressure dial yourself, not to feel, but to know, to see if it speaks. It does, quietly. You package it not in a box, but a scroll case, the kind a messenger might carry, with a false lid, just in case. When you deliver it, yes, you deliver it, not your maid. The man isn't surprised. He accepts it with both hands and a bow deeper than most nobles ever bother to offer. Before leaving, he pauses. She once said, he murmurs, that she forgets herself when I'm away. I want her to remember that she exists. You don't reply. You can't. Instead, you touch your palm to your heart and nod once. After he vanishes into the mist, you walk the long way home, past the bakery, past the bathhouse, past the alley where someone once carved a heart into the brick and no one's dared to wash it away. You arrive to find something strange waiting on your doorstep. A book, old, leather-bound, written in Greek. You open it. It's not just medical theory. It's designs, pages and pages. From Alexandria, it seems. But not the sanitized versions passed through monkish hands. These are raw. Devices shaped like shells, like spirals, like the phases of the moon. One sketch stops you. It's almost identical to something you made last spring, before you ever saw this book. You feel something tighten in your chest, not fear, something like fate. Historians still argue whether these texts ever existed. Most claim they were destroyed, censored, or simply mythologized by women who needed ancestors. But here it is, in your hands, real and used. I run my fingers along the spine and whisper something to the lily still blooming on your sill. I'm not the first. And maybe,
just maybe, you're not the last.
You don't sleep that night. Not out of fear, not quite excitement, but something heavier. The kind of weight that comes when you realize you're standing not at the end of something, but the middle of it. And the pages that came before you were just hidden, not absent. You spend hours turning through that Greek book by candlelight, tracing sketches that echo your own. Curves shaped like shells, loops designed to rotate gently within linen wraps. Notes in margins for healing, for mourning, for reunions. One note scrawled in hurried ink reads, "Made for her when she returned from the mountain, body stiff, heart silent." You pause. You don't know who she was or what mountain, but you understand exactly what was made. As dawn approaches, you're interrupted by a pounding at the door, not a knock. Urgent, unafraid, dangerous. You open it half ready to lie, half ready to run. But it's not a priest or a soldier. It's her, the noblewoman from months ago, the one who never gave her name, who once asked for something that reminded her she could burn. This time her hands shake. "Make me one that hurts," she says. You blink. "That hurts you?" "No," she whispers, "him." You say nothing. Let the silence sit. Then, what do you want it to look like? She smiles. A crack down the middle. Like nothing. Like innocence. You nod, slowly, not in agreement, in understanding. You guide her to the bench and take out your hidden journal. Turn to the page marked Model 13, False Gentleness. A device shaped like a pestle, smooth at first glance, but layered inside with a tiny hollow pocket, where powdered stinging nettle can be placed beneath a wax seal. A mechanism built not for love, but for warning. She studies the sketch. "I want it ready by Thursday." You don't ask why. You know. After she leaves, you sit for a long time, staring at your hands. The same hands that made rosewood cradles and warm spiral helices now prepare to craft something cruel. And yet, maybe not cruel. Maybe just true. You begin. The wood is boxwood, innocuous, pale, easily dismissed. The handle lined with ribbon that can be untied with a single pull. The internal cavity shallow, just enough for the dried nettle dust, sealed with wax, which melts at a very specific body temperature. A trick you learned from a former nun who once mailed you 24 bees encased in sugar cubes. You finish the piece just before sunset. Wrap it in a bolt of blue-gray linen, the kind used in baby christenings. A private joke, perhaps, or a protective charm.
You place it into a case lined with lamb's wool and set it aside. Then a thought. You turn back to the Greek book. Search its pages for anything like this. You find it. Page 76. A design nearly identical. In the margins, crafted not from vengeance, but to teach. Pain brief, memory longer. You feel something catch in your throat. Close the book gently. This is your lineage then. Not alchemy, not medicine, but reminder that the body remembers, and sometimes it insists. You clean your bench, and as you do, another package arrives. This one's wrapped in white silk. No note. You open it. Inside, a lock of hair, curled, bound with silver thread. You recognize the thread. You gave it to the bishop's niece months ago, when she asked for something to tie around her wrist to remember she's real. No blood, no object, just the hair. It's enough. You retrieve a device from your hidden drawer, one you made long ago, never delivered. A small wand carved from mulberry wood, with an etched quote on its base, "I was always here." You wrap it in rose paper and leave it outside your door with a single cornflower. She'll find it, or someone will. You light the last candle and whisper to your tools, now clean and waiting. Make the next one gentler.
The wind today smells like ash. Not the heavy kind from fires or chimneys, but something softer, like the faint memory of incense once burned for someone's soul. You don't like it. It reminds you of endings. But the city doesn't end, and neither does the knocking. This one comes in the evening. No warning, no name. Just a cloaked figure, soaked to the knees, carrying a satchel made from animal skin and stitched in a pattern you almost recognize. Until she speaks. "You owe me a storm," she says. Your heart stops. Mademoiselle X. You thought she'd vanished. You remember the night clearly. A year ago, trapped in your cellar during a flood. Candlelight dancing off jars of crushed anise and sulfur. She had wine, laughter, and a list of unspoken sins longer than any monk's forgiveness. That night, she asked you to make something wild enough to be blamed on the gods. You never finished it. Now she's back. "I've traveled," she says, stripping off her gloves. "I've seen things that made me forget what I used to need. But now I remember, and I want it, the unfinished piece." You dig through your archives, the literal ones, beneath the floorboards,
behind the blue jars of dried mint, is a half-finished piece. Copper coils wrapped around a handle of obsidian, shaped into a crescent. Not beautiful, not safe. She takes it in her hands like a relic. But she winces. It's cold. Of course it is. Obsidian always is. You remember why you stopped. The stone held chill like grief. But she wants it. So you finish it. You shape the handle again, wrapping it in horsehair soaked in oil of clove and night jasmine. You balance the coils so they respond to slight wrist turns. A slow twist becomes a wave. A flick becomes a ripple. You inlay the base with a mother-of-pearl coin, etched with her original words, "Wild enough." She watches you work in silence. No jokes, no sarcasm, just steady fire behind her gaze. Finally, when it's done, she holds it to her chest. "I'm not asking for pleasure," she says. "I'm asking for return. I want to remember who I was before obedience." You nod. She leaves the satchel behind. You don't look in it right away. When you do, hours later, you find a lockpick made from bone, a letter written in 3 languages, a vial of dried petals labeled for walking between. You store it all in your hidden drawer, even though you don't understand it yet. Later that night, you begin a new sketch, a pair of interlocking pieces, each shaped like a question mark. Together, they form a spiral. Apart, they are incomplete. You don't know who they're for yet, but someone's coming. Just as you close the book, there's a soft knock. A servant, eyes downcast. He hands you a parcel, no words. Inside, a sealed envelope, a single gold coin, and a note that reads, "The bishop drinks your moon wine. He says it helps him sleep. We both know better." You laugh. You actually laugh. The kind that shakes your ribs and feels like a window opening. You once told yourself you'd never serve a man like that. But maybe you are, quietly, underneath his sermons, behind his pulpit. Because your moon wine? It's laced with something old. Not poison, not quite truth. Just enough Damiana and Blue Lotus to make thinking feel like sin, and doubt feel comfort. Historians still argue whether moon wine was used in spiritual rituals or just exaggerated by scandalous poets. You don't care. You only know this: he's sleeping more, speaking less, and leaving the women alone. You take that as victory. You pour yourself a glass, not moon wine, but something simple, plum, a gift from the Widow 4. You sip it slowly. In the mirror, you catch your own reflection. Your eyes look tired, but they do not look ashamed. You raise the glass to no one and whisper, "I'll finish everything I start."
The week ends with sun, rare, golden, and almost disrespectfully cheerful. You keep the curtains half drawn anyway. Too much light makes the dust show, and you don't like dust in places that carry memory. You're polishing a curved birchwood piece, a commission for a seamstress who claims she can only feel joy if it fits inside a thimble. When a courier arrives, panting and wide-eyed, like he's outrun the devil. No words, just a box. You recognize the seal immediately, the crest of House Dormont, a family known for building churches, marrying cousins, and hiding scandals like they were scented handkerchiefs. Inside the box, a single pearl, a strip of pale leather, and a note. She wants something that burns, but leaves her whole. You know who she is. The Countess who once ordered a device with just enough resistance to not forgive. She returns with intent. You understand. You pull out the old design, the one you swore you'd never make again, not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. A device wrapped in braided horsehair, laced with dry ginger root beneath the surface, warming on contact, pulsing slightly when held tightly enough. At the center, a copper ring, not for support, but for symbolism. The closed loop, the returning pain, the decision to stay. You make it slowly. This one deserves patience. You test its warmth on your own wrist, just enough to sting. When finished, you polish the wood with oil of myrrh and add one last detail, a clasp, not to close, but to lock. She'll know what it means. She'll choose whether to use it. You wrap it in crushed velvet, deep plum, regal but bruised. As you package it, you remember something your mentor once said, back when you were still sanding mortar for herbal compresses and afraid of splinters. Not every request is a cry for help. Sometimes it's a declaration. You never understood that until now. That afternoon, while sweeping the front step, a child skips by and presses a slip of paper into your palm without stopping. On it, in looping ink, do you make things for people who can't ask? You blink. No signature. You return to your bench, pull out a sketch you drew years ago and buried. A device not meant for hands, but for placement. Soft, curved, with no edges, no ridges, nothing but presence. It's not about stimulation. It's about proof. Proof that the body still exists, that it can hold something, even when it cannot hold hope. You carve it from willow, soft, forgiving, chosen because it bends without snapping. You don't decorate it. You don't name it. You just wrap it in linen and leave it on the bench. Whoever asked for it, they'll come. That night, while cleaning,
You find the pearl from the dormant box has rolled beneath the cupboard. You pick it up, feel its chill. It reminds you of someone, the bishop's niece maybe, or the dancer, or you. You place it in your drawer beside the horn-carved tool no one's claimed. Some objects wait for their names. As the shop grows quiet, you feel it again, that slow, rising certainty, that everything you've built, carved, created, it's more than wood, oil, and candlelight. It's a language, and you're fluent in all the things people are afraid to say. Outside, bells toll for evening prayer. Inside, your candle sputters, but before it dies, you light another, because your hands remember, and tomorrow someone will knock.
The knock comes at dawn. You're not surprised. You've been expecting someone. Not anyone in particular, just someone. Because that's how it always is. The quiet before the storm. The stillness before a need. But when you open the door, no one is there. Only a box. Small, simple, wrapped in gray silk, with a clasp made from a broken spoon. That detail alone tells you everything. Someone made this with what they had. You carry it in like a relic. Inside, you find a letter, unfolded, unsealed, written in a trembling hand. They burned her for loving too loudly. I want to carry what she was, not in my arms, inside me. You sit down. You don't cry. You haven't cried in years. But your chest does that tightening thing it does when grief walks in, dressed as clarity. You don't know who she was. You don't know who you are making this for. But you begin. You choose pine for the core, a soft wood, easy to warm, light to carry. You wrap it in layers of suede, dyed with crushed petals. You carve no handle. There's no need. This isn't for use. This is for remembrance. At the base, you inlay a stone, small, smooth, obsidian. You whisper to it as you press it in. Let her stay. You don't seal the piece in wax like usual. You let it breathe. And you wrap it not in cloth, but in hair. A braid, silver threaded, left behind in a box long ago. When you finish, you place it in your drawer, beside the others, that were made without names, without requests, without clients, just presence. And then, finally, you walk through the shop one last time. You dust the counters. You polish the glass. You feed the lily one drop of sugar water. Then you gather your tools, not all of them, just the ones that feel like extensions of your fingers,
and you pack a small bag. You open the back door. You don't leave a note, only a box, wrapped in purple silk, tied with red thread. Inside, a copy of the Greek book, a bottle of moon wine, a carving knife worn smooth, and a folded card. For whoever comes next, use it kindly. You place the box on the steps of the cathedral, just before the bells ring, and then you vanish, like smoke, but not gone, because the things you made, they're still breathing. And now, dear listener, let your breath soften. Let your shoulders fall. There's no more rushing, no more secret knocks. The fire has burned low, and the door has closed behind us. Somewhere in a quiet city, behind a velvet-curtained shop, tools still lie waiting. Smooth wood, polished stone, scraps of silk tucked carefully beside vials that never made it to the ledger. The apothecary is empty, but its silence still hums with memory, with the echo of laughter, of whispered requests, of soft defiance pressed into palm-sized shapes. You have walked beside a person whose name will never be written in textbooks, whose work will never be displayed in glass cabinets, but whose touch lingers in the creak of drawers that hold stories, in the scent of orange blossom oil clinging to unfinished wood, in the courage it takes to ask for something you're not allowed to want. So rest now. Know that in every age someone like you existed, and someone like them carved light into dark places, one hand at a time. The shop may close, but the memory, that stays, soft, warm, waiting, like something hidden in linen just beneath your bed.